All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining today welcome to Open Office Hours. We just like to do this once a month and basically open our doors to anyone that has any questions that they want to work through, and anything Office 365, anything Modern Workplace that you need help with and you're stuck on, and we want to basically open our doors to say, hey, we want to help you get unstuck and help you move forward. So a couple housekeeping things before we get started. This is streaming to both Teams meeting as well as a YouTube Live. So we'll be bringing in people from chat in both places. Feel free to post any questions that you have. We do this the first Wednesday of every month, so feel free to, sign up for the next one as we roll them out. And we do this every month, so you're always welcome to join. And can you just give us a quick thumbs up or a comment, smiley face, something to say you can hear us, you can see us, everything good in that regard? And assuming, hey, where are you joining from? We'd love to know where you're joining from. And with that, I'll go ahead and switch over to Matt and Mike, and we can go ahead and get started.
Cool.
So
Thanks, Mitch.
go.
So it looks like we do have a question. Yiping posted a question for us there in the Teams chat, and he's asking about a migration from SharePoint on-prem to SharePoint online, and using Word templates, and maybe it sounds like some custom columns or metadata in a list or a library. And he wants to bring over basically it sounds like the structure of the list or the library along with the data. And so he tried exporting to Excel, but the data did not move over. Instead, the .doc file came over as a link.
Yeah, so it looks to me like actually there's not a lot of columns. It looks like which Yiping, we can unmute you if you want to kind of explain what's going on or ask any questions, but it looks to me like there aren't any real custom columns, and you're really looking at the contents of the files to get transferred. If all you're worried about is the files, there's several things you could do. The easiest way is to actually open that library as in Windows Explorer or in a tool that allows you to just download all the files, because in that particular case, they're just going to be files, and then re-upload them to the new SharePoint Online. That's the most manual way. You're not going to save the modified dates. You're not going to save the creation dates. If there's any custom columns on those in that list or library, you're not going to keep those as you transfer over. If you're looking for a more holistic way to transfer that data, I would strongly encourage you to look into purchasing a tool like ShareGate. It's not cheap. To be clear, it's I forget what it is, but it's more than $1,000, I think, for a seat. But that tool makes the process extremely simple, very straightforward. You have to learn the tool a little bit, but basically you would point it at your old site. And what we usually do, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, a lot of times when we migrate, we don't just do a straight migration. If we do a straight migration, what we'll do is we'll actually migrate from your on-premise installation into like an archive location that would be in SharePoint Online, and then we basically would do a whole process to review the content and then recreate the content in SharePoint Online. But you can kind of do whatever you want, and specific to your question, that tool makes it really easy to just say, I want to go from this library to this library, and it'll recreate the library, it'll recreate all the files, you'll have all the metadata, you'll have all the contents, everything will be the same. There are some exceptions to that, but based on the limited things you've provided, I think it would be super simple for it to do it. Now, obviously, if this is the only library you have a problem with, and you don't want to use the tool for everything, that's pretty expensive for one library. So I don't know, hopefully that helps.
In our experience, we've dealt with a lot of larger migrations, and so a tool like ShareGate does make sense. I would add to the things that you mentioned, you can also bring over version history, and you can also choose how much version history you want to bring over. So if you want the last 5 versions or all of the version history, that can be pretty useful.
For sure, yep. And Yi, again, if you want to come off mute and have a conversation with us about it, just either post a message, raise your hand, whatever, and we can allow you to unmute yourself. But hopefully that answers your question.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You are welcome to unmute. We did allow that, and we should be able to hear you.
Okay.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
Oops.
Can you hear me now?
Check something here. Oh,
I
here we go.
am unmuted.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry, I had
Okay,
one
you can
slide
hear
I
me?
pulled down.
Yes,
Yep.
we can hear you now. Yep.
Awesome, thank you. So, if I can just clarify the question, we have the Word templates in SharePoint. So in the library, they would just click New, and then the template would open up and they would fill in different fields.
Yep.
And then that Word document would save the data in the fields, and it'll be stored in the SharePoint library. What they want to do is just have a list of, each field will have its own column.
Mm-hmm.
And when they migrate all of this stuff over, they don't want to have to open up a Word document. They want to just be able to see the entries. Each entry would be a row.
So they're moving from a document-based data storage to a list-based storage model.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to make sure, like the screenshot you posted doesn't include any custom columns. So it's confusing to me about you've said templates, and I understand what you mean by that. And in the SharePoint document library, you can set up a template, and you can use a doc template, and you can use what are called quick parts, and those quick parts can store the data in columns within SharePoint. But it's still not clear to me. Is that what is happening in on-premise?
On-prem is, no, the columns are just generic columns of when that document was saved to SharePoint.
Got it.
So we want to create a new list
Yeah.
with the new columns that match the fields that's currently in the Word template. But, each one of them are separate files.
Yep.
So we're trying to figure out if there's a way to get the data from the templates.
How much data are we talking about? Thousands, hundreds?
I would say hundreds.
Hundreds. So, and do you think that the initial feedback is it's not easy, right? So a Word document that's very unstructured, that template that was created, unless it has special things like I was talking about quick parts, you're not going to be in a situation where those quick parts, using the quick parts, you kind of identify what is the data, and you create a delineated spot in the form with a well-defined and well-named structure. Without that, it's going to be very difficult to find that data within a more normal template and try to use that template to transfer that data. It can be done. You're talking about custom programming. You're talking about custom, ingesting Word documents, identifying content, and storing it. For the number of items that you're talking about, I don't know that it's worth the effort.
Would this be something that is possible with Power Automate Desktop?
I mean, maybe. It does know how to open up Word documents. A lot of it comes down to how really, truly well-formed all the templates are and all the data is. As you know, that's the biggest problem with all of these things, right? You start out with a Word template, but the template is just a template. I saved it and I, added an extra couple words or moved something around because I like the formatting better, and then all of a sudden it's very difficult to find. So unfortunately, I don't think there's a automated way to do that. What I would usually recommend in this type of scenario would be, like I was saying originally, I would migrate all of the old templates or the old files into an archive document library, and then I would create a new one that works the way you want going forward, and then I would choose to manually migrate only a small portion of these files in. That's the easiest solution. Obviously, if it's very important, you can take other methods, but I think that's probably the best option for you.
Okay, that actually was our final solution, but I saw this, you were having this today, and I thought, well, I'm going to present the question and see if there's anything that I'm missing.
No, I think your final solution is probably it's the most practical for what you're doing, right? It's not, you know, as with most things, nothing is perfect, but I think it's the most practical for what you're doing.
Great. Thank you.
Not a problem.
All right, we don't have any other questions at the moment, but feel free to drop them in chat. And if you want to raise your hand and you know, come on stage and chat with us, you're more than welcome to. Just let us know. In the meantime, we'll turn on some nice elevator music for y'all.
You don't think Power Automate Desktop?
Hey, Mitch. Hey.
Yeah, you're welcome to unmute again and jump on.
Thank you. So we had a Power Automate flow that goes to a SharePoint site on-prem, and it looks at calendars, like events in a calendar, and it sends an email reminder 1 week before the event. We have changed over the calendar to SharePoint Online, and when I put the URL of that new calendar, it's not recognizing that URL.
Yeah, so did you change the connection to a brand new connection? Because I would guess that your previous connection was using a gateway to get to on-prem. Is that fair?
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So you
All right.
your current one, your current connection is saying, hey, I'm a special connection. I connect through a gateway. And so then what it's going to do is it's going to ask that gateway and pass whatever URL you give it to try to go get it. But the gateway is going to go, I don't like that's not on-prem. What am I supposed to do with that? If I had to guess, that's what's going on. So if I were to suggest anything, it would be create a new connection for that to SharePoint, and in the new connection, just don't choose to use a gateway, and it should work.
Okay, thanks.
Not a problem.
So Matt, I know that we had a couple questions that we kind of wanted to review, but before, talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges or limitations with using something like Power Automate Desktop to accomplish what she was trying to accomplish.
I don't think there's necessarily a problem. The biggest challenge with it is, like I was saying, so I'm not an expert in Power Automate Desktop to start with.
Yep.
But my understanding of how it works and my relation to other, largely screen scraped kind of approaches, it is susceptible to the template is different, right?
Yes.
From the limited things I saw, like back to 2001 is from 2010 was the last time it was modified. I would imagine the template's changed, in which case, you got the time to set it up, the
so
time
there are
to
more
figure out what it,
variables,
if it was 100,000 and you needed them all, it's like,
it might be worth it.
yeah, probably. Like let's work through it, and maybe you can get half of them, right? But with just a couple hundred, it's kind of like I don't know that it's not every organization has interns or someone else that they could do to it. But I mean, honestly, hiring somebody that is relatively low wage to go do that exercise for 2 days probably is a more economical and effective solution to the problem, depending on what it is, right? Like, there's a lot of complexities there. The other thing is, we didn't ask how long the templates are. If it's 50 pages of content, that also changes in both ways, right? In the complexity of doing it,
For sure.
all the way through. So, yeah. So there was, like, in the meantime, until somebody has another question, we did have a couple things that came in earlier that I wanted to talk about quick. Unfortunately, some of them are going to be a little bit more challenging to kind of explain. But the one I did want to raise up, which I got to...
Real quick, Yiping, I didn't lower your hand last time you asked a question. I'm going to do it this time. If you have another one, feel free to raise it. Continue.
Okay. I gotta bring something up here a second, but. Where is it? Yeah, there it is. So there was a question that came in on one of our blog posts related to auto incrementing and how to get access to, or how to deal with a scenario where I want to have, so the scenario that the blog post talks about is all about, I want to have an auto increment number or a ID number for a file, and I want to manage that myself. I want to manage the sequence of that and how that works myself. And so we kind of built out an example flow that would deal with that when a document gets created, creating the flow or updating the item to have a new ID based on a list. So we have a list that has your IDs, and you have the list with your files, and you basically, the first one starts with 1, goes to 2, goes to 3, and there was a discussion or question about how do you do that if I have, let's say, 5 different categories of documents within the document library, and I want a separate number for each of them, and how do I make sure that we don't have an infinite loop? So how does it not just keep going to over and over again? And we responded, we had some feedback on that, but I kind of wanted to review a minute about how some of this works and what your options are. And so I'm going to quick find my test site and my test. Yep, it was onboarding. So give me just one moment, and I'm going to open up my test here, and I'm going to walk through a little bit about it, and we'll go from there. And again, anybody who's online, feel free to interrupt with questions, because we'd rather be talking about questions that anybody has about anything.
Anything?
Anything.
Not
just anything.
Anything.
Okay. No guarantees.
No guarantees that we'll be able to answer it, but, give me just a second. I'm looking for where I put that. Okay. So the crux of the question, or the crux of the issue that I'm going to kind of go through here is, which I don't know, Mitch, are you sharing my...
Sure am.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the infinite loop scenario, created or modified. So basically, the scenario that I'm going to build out right now is a scenario that comes up quite a bit related to if I go in here and I create when item is created or modified, and I am, I didn't want to do, well, sure. Yeah, we'll do item. That's fine. So this works for item or file. So when anything gets created in the new hire checklist, I'm going to say, okay, cool, that's great. Let me update that. I'm going to update the item. Choose this ID, and I'm gonna, let's say, set the title. So I'm gonna set the title, right? So I save this, and this creates and you can see it right here, update item. This flow may result in an infinite trigger loop. Please ensure you add appropriate conditional checks to prevent this flow from triggering itself. So the challenge with this is I have this when item is created or modified, and then I'm immediately updating the same exact item or the same exact list. And so what that creates is a scenario where you're updating yourself over and over and over again, which the same thing happens, it looks like Mitch posted the blog, the same thing happens in a more complicated way related to the auto increment item or blog that we created. And the challenge being that I have to update the item that just triggered me to run. And so there's a couple different ways to handle this. So for example, an easy way to handle this would be to say, I'm going to create a condition, and I'm going to do a condition based on I can choose anything. We often use like a status column, but I could do anything for example, like the title, and say, hey, if the title is equal to nothing or blank, empty string, which I think actually I can just do this, then do the update, right? So only update the title to be something if it's not there, which from a flow checker perspective, it's still going to give you the warning, but in theory, this solves the problem, right? So I'm updating the title only if the title is empty, right? Seems pretty simple. There's several challenges with this. Number one, this means that your flow is still going to run every single time. And so one way to address that you may be familiar with is to use something called trigger conditions. So another way to handle this that would make it so that the triggered or the flow never runs ever would be to go in and go to the settings on the trigger, which people may not have even kind of gotten into this very much. This is pretty unique or specific content. Most of this you don't ever really want to change. The couple things I'll mention, which one of them we're going to talk about in a minute, which is trigger conditions. But the other one I was going to mention is split on. So split on is an interesting thing, and in most cases it's turned on. And what that means is that you're going to get, let's say you updated 5 items all at once in bulk, you're going to get 5 separate flow runs. It is also possible to turn this off, and if you were to turn this off, you're going to get one flow with an array of items. And sometimes you'll notice that when you'll all of a sudden, whenever you're doing anything with the data from it, you'll end up getting loops instead of just having a condition like this. It'll be in a loop, and that's probably the result of having this disabled. The rest of the stuff we won't worry about it too much. The last thing is the trigger conditions, which I'm going to add a trigger condition, which Mike, if you can help me with the syntax for this, because I can't 100% remember what it is, but it's something like...
It's not fun, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's something, this is probably one of the biggest problems with trigger conditions, but the benefit, like I said, the benefit of it is that you won't end up ever running this flow when it isn't needed. So, did you have it right there or no?
What trigger condition are you specifically looking to?
I'm just looking to whether or not the title has got a value.
Okay.
I just can't remember. I think it's at trigger outputs. I think it's the same thing. I just can't remember the detail of it.
I'm trying to think of where I have a great example of this.
I've got one, but I can't bring it up here on screen.
You have the same problem as me.
Well, no, because I don't want to bring it up because I'm sharing right now.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I'll go, Mitch, make sure I'm not sharing. I'll go dig one up.
Yeah. Anyways, so if I put a trigger condition in here, instead of doing it here, what'll happen, the benefit of it is, like I said before, this entire flow will just never be triggered, which has some benefits. Number one, if you ever have a situation where you are you're gonna get throttled because you're running too many actions or too many triggers for a flow with your license, this will remove it because the flow will never, ever, ever run, which means you don't get the cost of that. In addition, if you can imagine, let's say I have 1,000 items that are going on over the course of a week, and maybe you're modifying it several times, you're gonna have thousands of runs of this thing, and managing that and seeing which ones actually are doing work and which ones aren't is also a challenge. This alleviates that problem as well, because the trigger condition, it just simply, when you go into, I'll save this, when you go into the history, you won't even ever see it run. You'll only see the ones that actually align with the trigger condition values. So that's some of the benefits of it.
Where would you like me to post an example?
You can post it in the team.
Chat?
Yeah, in the chat. Because I'll just grab it and throw it in.
It's a fairly complex example, but
But that is exactly what I was thinking it was. So if I come in here and go into the settings and add, and so the way this works, this is what's really confusing about this. This is what Mike and I were talking about, the challenges with it, is you end up having to write all of the code yourself. And so this has got like an and, which we don't need, which I'll get rid of this one, which is an equals on the output here. And then I think, yep, so equals. So we're going to basically say equals, verify one last thing. Yep, and I got to put an and in front, at sign in front of this. That's what I thought. So equals, and then I say, hey, trigger outputs body, and then I don't know what it really is, but it's probably title. And then I'm going to just say, quote, quote, meaning, hey, it's empty or an empty string, right? And then if I were to click done on this, it's going to say, hey, evaluate this expression before you even run the trigger, and then if it's true, then run the trigger. Otherwise, just ignore it. Act like it never, ever happened. So that's one way to solve this instead of having a condition here inside the logic. And I think you can see probably the benefits and challenges with that. This is pretty explicit. This is available to everyone. It's obvious to whoever's developing it, but that means your trigger is going to run every time. And it's, you know, you're, like I said before, you're going to eat up resources, and you also end up having maybe a little bit more time challenging managing it. One way to solve some of
I'll add one additional challenge to that scenario is if you're ever like debugging or troubleshooting an issue with your flow and you're looking at the run history.
Yeah, yep, that's
it'll every one of those things
thousands of them
run, and there'll be tons of them in there, and so then you've got to sift through all of those extra runs that didn't do anything.
So one thing that I do to try to help with the fact that, like, so if I am going to put in a trigger condition, is I'll come in here and put, if you, I might have went through too fast, but I come in here and I come into the add note feature, and I add the trigger condition into the note. And so what that immediately tells me if I'm a developer is, hey, wait a minute, there's a trigger condition. I need to go look at that. I need to be thinking about that when I'm looking at why this is running. Because the challenge will be, you'll go, I don't understand, this flow's not running, it's not running, it's not running. Why isn't it running? Oh, we have a trigger condition. It's not meeting the trigger condition. That's why it's not running. So the only other, so that kind of covers most of the scenarios I was going to talk about. The last thing I was going to mention is more technical, but I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of it, and that is, there is a way using HTTP requests to actually make an update that never triggers anything ever. It's called a system update, and it uses the REST API. And so you can actually, which if you're not familiar with it, you can come in here into SharePoint, and it's kind of a carve out that Microsoft has made to the HTTP connector. So I can use this, send an HTTP request to SharePoint, and I can put in a site, I can set up all my methods for a web request, and if I set it up properly using something like a system update, which again is a internal update, that update actually allows you to update lots of things. So it's actually the thing that I mentioned ShareGate before as the tool that migrates things. That tool actually uses that type of update to do things like update the owner and when it was last modified and when was last updated. Now, you can only use that as a site collection admin. You have to be a super user on that site to be able to use that type of connection. But using that type of connection, you also have an option to say, don't trigger anything. And so from a SharePoint perspective, it will never even look like you modified that item. It's kind of an internal system level update that you can make happen. Again, I would use that very sparingly. It is an advanced technique, an advanced feature. However, it can be very useful if we've used it to fix, we've found some bugs within some of the features within SharePoint, and some of the internal fields get corrupted or don't get set properly. And to fix it, we've used flows that go in and actually update those using that system update, because there is no other way to update. There is no other way to fix it other than call Microsoft every time it happens and have them go run a script on the back end, which is not very efficient. So I just wanted to go through those. I know it's pretty complicated and technical. Hopefully somebody found it useful.
We did have another question from Christina.
She was at our webinar yesterday. Welcome back.
Welcome. If you do a get items action and you want the top record, is there a way to prevent the apply to each when doing an update action?
That is a great question. There are a few different ways to manage it. I'm not convinced that there's any that is great.
So the default, behavior of that, the get items action is going to return an array no matter what.
No,
Even if there's
correct.
only one thing,
Yep,
it's returning an array,
correct.
which in terms of the next action, it's going to interpret that as potentially more than one thing.
Correct.
So then
Mike,
it's
would
gonna-
you mind talking into the mic, please?
Sorry, Mitch. So it's going to interpret that as an array no matter what. And so you kind of don't have a choice. There are some options though, like a select option, right, will get you down to one item, I think. And maybe even you can like use a selector in a compose action maybe.
Yeah, so I've used a couple different ways to manage it. I'm going to give you a couple different ways that you can go about it. There's pros and cons to all of them, and I hate this because the real problem is when you do select it and you just want one, there is no option to then use anything that you get from that to get just one and to make it really nice to use. So if I go in and I say, let me go back to my onboarding scenario, and I'll go to my new hire checklist, and let's say that I, in here, put in a filter query to filter by something, and I'm sure I'm only going to get one. There's no way to say, hey, cool, I just have one, so just use it. The best way to, so there's several things you can do. Number one, you can ignore the apply to each because it doesn't really matter because you only have one and it's only going to have one. The challenge with that can be if I have multiple apply to eaches, that can be a problem. Also, if you wanted to, for example, create a variable inside apply to each, you can't do it. You'd have to create it outside of it and then use it inside of it because there's some rules about what you can use within an apply to each. So one of the things that can do, or one of the things that I've done, like Mike was mentioning, a compose. Oh my goodness, can't type. So you can use a compose action to come in and say, hey, I want to get the value, the list of, I'm going to go to the expression, I'm going to do first, and I'm going to choose this one. So basically this is going to get the first of that. And then I could technically go down further and just use the condition right on that. So if I use the output of compose, the problem is you can notice is the output of compose is simply a big blob.
It's not strongly typed.
It's not strongly typed. Now, you can get around that by adding another thing here that says read from JSON, and you can do a bunch of other stuff, but that's not usually fun either. What I have done in the past to get around some of that stuff is to then go back in and say, I'm going to SharePoint, I'm going to get, and then in here, I choose all the same stuff. And then instead of doing what I did before, I'll do expression first. And then at the end of this, I'll do another question mark ID. And so then, in theory, what this will do, assuming you get it right, is it would actually go get the item again from SharePoint, but just the one item. And now you have a strongly typed thing that you can come down in the condition and select the exact thing you want. None of this is great. None of this is good. I've never found a really good solution to this problem. I've used a number of different ways to get around it and deal with it, but none of them are super great.
So you either pay for it with an extra request to SharePoint, or you pay for it with complexity in your flow.
Correct. Or a little bit of both, right? I mean, this first thing is not super simple, right? To a novice person who's using flows, they'll like, what is this? I don't even understand what any of that is.
Yeah, and those are some of the things that scare people away.
For sure, right? Why do I have to do all of that stuff?
Right.
Which is why, in a lot of ways, we just ignore it and just use the apply to each or apply each and move on, right? Like,
Yeah, if you know you're only dealing with one item.
it's not super complicated. Where it gets, because I mean, the reality is if you're dealing with a simple flow anyways, it doesn't really matter. If you're dealing with a very, very, very complex flow, it probably is worth it to.
With lots of actions, and you
Yep.
got to pay attention to how many actions you're running and
Yeah,
requests
yeah,
you're making.
And the other thing too is that sometimes I will get the item again, just for the sake of making sure I have the latest of everything. If I was getting it from the trigger, as an example.
Yep.
So
In case somebody else touched it.
had modified it, yeah. Sometimes I'll do a locking approach where I'll lock the record and then come back and get the latest copy of it.
Makes sense.
Christina, I would imagine that Mitch has let you come off mute if you would like. I know you're typing again. I'm not sure if you're asking another question, but if you want to ask it in person, you're more than welcome to. If not, that's totally fine too.
Cool, yeah, go ahead. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, thanks guys. So I had a problem where did a complex flow and I got an error where I had too many levels.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons they said is possibly that it had a lot of apply to eaches. So what I had to do now is create a parallel branch now
Yep.
and go from there.
So one of the two things I will mention to you about that related to complexity is, so I don't know what type of things you're doing. Are you familiar at all with solutions or child flows?
Did some research on it. It's some not getting into it. So to say know a lot about it, no.
Okay. So definitely doing some of the approaches that we're talking about can help that, right? Not having a bunch of apply to eaches all over the place. That can 100% help. And you could definitely use one of the approaches we showed to do some of that. The other thing you can do, so if you're doing something that's really complicated, and the reason I mentioned solution is with that many levels, chances are it's a fairly complex flow. Chances it's not for automation of your personal things. I would look into, I don't know what type of organization you're in. I don't know where they are in their maturity of using and managing the Power Platform, Power Apps. But I would try to get an environment or get access to a separate environment, and use solutions. And with the use of solutions, you can package your flow together, and you can also use child flows. And child flows would allow you to say, if you're working on something, you can create a whole section of logic and then for a branch of it. So for example, if I'm in the middle of doing something, maybe I get some data ready and then I say, hey, now that we've made a decision about this thing and it needs to go do this other piece of work, I would actually say, okay, cool. Go, child flow, go do what you want to do. And then I can either wait for that child flow or I can just let that child flow go. And it really can help you organize some of your logic into components and make it smaller. And so then you don't have that nesting, because from that point forward, you're actually in a different flow. And so the way that'll work is the main flow will run, the child flow will run, and then again, you can choose to whether or not you want that child flow to wait for the child flow to finish before it comes back and runs the next thing, or it can your flow can continue on. So it's something to consider. Obviously it's not going to fix your problem directly, but if you're doing something that complicated, I would strongly recommend investigating the concept of environments, solutions, child flows, to see whether or not that's something that would help you. Hey, Mitch.
Thanks so much.
Oh, not a problem at all. Hey, Mitch, the Surface stopped showing what you had, by the way. I saw something come in from YouTube, but I don't know what it was.
Me and Steven are just chatting about approval flows.
Okay, so you got it? Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
I was just asking what people are working on, and so he was sharing. And
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Approvals is a super common one.
Yep, approval is very common.
I can't think of any organization I've worked with that doesn't use them
At some level, yeah.
at some level,
Yep. Even when they don't use them, they actually are using them.
right? Microsoft has cornered the market.
Yeah. Mitch, I did have one other question. Can you stop sharing my screen for a second? I want to pull it up and make sure that I.
Yeah, yep, you're not sharing.
Okay, cool.
Just a reminder for anyone new that's joined, this is office hours. We open up the floor to any questions that you might have about Office 365 or anything in the modern workplace space. We'd love to chat and help you get unstuck if you're stuck on something, or even if you just need a second set of eyes on something. Feel free to let us know and drop something in chat, and we'll do our best to help.
Okay, Mitch, I can take over for a minute.
All right.
So there was a comment back to actually one of our other responses about how we're going about navigating from a gallery in Power Apps. So I've switched technologies here, just so everybody's following along. We're now in Power Apps. And I just wanted to walk through that quick. So let me hop in here and get onboarding. Yep, my favorite. New hire checklist. And so basically the concept is, let's say I have a gallery, and I'm going to connect it to my new hire checklist. And now I want to make it so that it does something when I click on this, right? One thing you can do would be, there's a button here. I could go into this, and then I could do, I could just use what this has. And so if I go into the gallery itself, there's an on select, which does something. But what if I come in here and I'm editing inside here, and I add a button? So now I've got a button, and I want to do something in here. So someone might come in here and say, I want to navigate to another page, which I don't have right now, so let me quick add another screen. To another screen, right? So I could come in here, and on this button, I can say, so that would work, and it would work really well. The problem with it is then we're in a situation where a user actually has to click this particular button in order to make this work. What if I wanted it so that if they clicked anywhere here, no matter where they click, it goes somewhere? Because if you notice, that's not doing anything. So what you do there, and what was mentioned in this, is instead you click on the entire gallery, and you change this to be the navigate. And if you do this, this works better. So now if I come in and I select anywhere, or select on the what the gallery's navigation is, I go, right? But now if I click on the button, so if I click on the button, it goes as well, but this one doesn't use the same logic. So if I added some other logic, it would still run this. So what I really want to do here is what was there originally, which would be so select the parent. So now all of these things are hooked together, all together. And so what they were just pointing out is in one of our videos, we actually put something directly on the button, and their suggestion was to put it on the gallery, which is a better solution overall. And this way, everything that's within the gallery, when you click on it, it takes you where you want to go and does what you want. So just a simple thing, but just wanted to bring that up.
All right, we've got about 10 minutes or so left. We'll hang out here for the time being, and feel free to drop any other questions in chat. I'll turn on some music again, and yeah, we look forward to hearing from you.
All right, so Federico has a question. He's asking, is there a way to get data from Planner as we do from Project on the web for reporting purposes?
The answer, short answer is I don't think so. Planner is really meant for the web experience, not a lot of super detailed integration. You can get data from Planner, like there are APIs to get data from Planner, but most of that data isn't really. Some of it depends on the type of reporting you're looking at doing. I'm making some assumptions about what you're trying to do, about due dates and length of time that something took and all of that kind of stuff. That's just not what Planner is really meant to do. I've seen some people use Planner or using Power Automate to update lists with data as Planner items get updated and moved through different steps in a process. But that's really just a pretty complicated solution.
And even then, you're limited to the data you're going to get out of those Planner items.
Correct, because Planner's data store is not super easy to just get access to and get data out of.
So as a workaround or a alternative, does it make sense to use something like, I hate to say it, Microsoft Lists or SharePoint Lists using something like the board view?
Yeah, so
and then you can pull data from that.
Yeah, so there's definitely some challenges with that, but with the new Kanban view or the new board view that's been released for lists, that wouldn't be something out of the question to try. A lot of that depends on what features you're using within Teams or within Planner already, and whether or not you can do something similar or close enough in lists.
To me, the biggest drawback with that is Microsoft has a product called Planner intended for a good purpose, and you have to reinvent the wheel because it's not all there.
Yeah. The Planner space is a challenging space for Microsoft. They have a lot of different teams that are working on it. They've got the project or enterprise, project management team that's working on some stuff. You've got the Planner team. You've got Azure DevOps. You've got you've got all these things.
Right.
Which you mentioned Azure DevOps, but I don't know, Federico. I don't know exactly what your background is, where you're coming from. A lot of some of our organizations, when they get to the point where they want to do some of the stuff you're talking about, they don't use Planner or a project. They go and say, I'm going to do it in DevOps, right? Which DevOps has a whole bunch of features related to that. But obviously, those are I say obviously. I don't know whether or not you're familiar with DevOps, but DevOps is a very software-focused planning tool that has a lot of features and great process, but really built for software development and project management within the software and technology space. So. But again, if you have some more questions or want to give some more feedback, I'm sure Mitch can allow you to unmute if you want to ask more specifics.
I did allow unmute if you want to. Otherwise, I see you're typing
Yeah,
now,
feel
so no
free to
worries.
type.
Cool,
That's
cool.
totally
No,
fine.
thanks so much. Thank you, guys. Yeah, no, we're on the building industry, so it's a little bit different from the software
Yep.
development.
Yep.
We just have a lot of cross-departmental items that come across, and we're trying to figure out what's the best way to track these items, right? And we find that we have so many tools
Mm-hmm.
within our portfolio, but none of them really do what what you want, right? So projects are a little bit too much for some things. It's just way too much. We don't need to use project for some of it, but at the same time, we still need to provide some kind of reporting to different heads, right? So
What type of
it comes to
reporting?
that.
What type of reporting are you specifically talking about? Like I was making some assumptions, but
So we're looking at mostly executive reporting that it has to happen manually right now. So we look at due dates that come across on different particular projects and tasks, and but summarizing some of these items, it's a lot easier to report when you are have large projects, right? So and the ERP side doesn't help, right? So we really need to rely on other tools to be able to summarize and report on those.
so there is here, let me I'm the wrong trigger here. Schedule. Let me do instant. Be the easiest.
Really walking away from Excel reporting. That's really what it is, right? So those things exist, that information exists, right? It's just how we walk away from Excel and put it in another tool instead of continuing to do that.
I think it's this one. So one of the things you could look at doing, but again, it's work. It's there's no two ways about it. Is there are ways in Power Automate to loop through and go through a list of tasks within a planner board. The unfortunate or challenge with that is, again, if you're if you have multiple boards and you want to do it for all of them, and you're creating new boards all the time, or new planners all the time, you have to find a way to kind of loop through them all. But you could loop through them all and say, hey, here's ones that aren't. This is the number of tasks that aren't complete, and here's the due dates. And you could put that into something where you could do a report on it. So summarizing that detail. But again, you're going to be creating something in Power Automate to go aggregate that data manually. It's not as simple as pointing Power BI at Planner and saying, "Hey, spit out for all the Planner boards, spit out the status of these boards," right? But you could do something. The question is it worth the effort and the time? And I can't answer that. But from Planner's perspective, it's really meant for that team management, and I don't know of good ways to report on it.
Okay, and really just trying to whether is it a fit for that or not. Is a Microsoft list maybe a better fit? It's just because we have the ability to access data in a different manner. And Planner is still a good tool. Maybe it's just not for a particular case or purpose.
Yeah, so I think lists might be better. I think the challenge with lists will be managing the security around those lists. It's similar to what the problems are with Planner in that if I'm in Planner, I have access from I have access as a member of that group to that planner, but there's not a lot of other access that can be given. It's the same kind of thing with a list. So if I have, let's say I have 4 different sites or 5 different sites with individual lists that have project details, you're still going to need to find a way to, yes, you can hook those up with Power BI, but you're still going to have like an admin user that has access to all of those lists to be able to aggregate them up so that when you actually go and have somebody view that data, they're seeing the appropriate data and seeing it in the right aggregate. So for what you're trying to do, you know, I think lists probably would have some benefit, but I don't know that it's the end all be all for what you want.
How about something like let's assume all of the planners, the boards are group associated, meaning team
Yep.
associated. What if we turned on Dataverse for teams?
Yep.
And then we built data flows that aggregated that content into a central Dataverse.
I'd have to look whether or not data flows can pull in from Planner.
Not Planner.
Oh, from the lists.
Yeah, like
You were talking from the lists.
build a Canvas app to
Yeah, yeah.
manage your tasks or something like that within your team. So then your data lives in Dataverse for Teams, so it's free for everybody who's part of that team. And then you build a data flow that can simply take stuff out of that Dataverse for Teams environment and all of the other ones that you have and aggregate it into a single Dataverse.
Yeah, that would work too.
repository. And then you can do organization-wide
That would for sure
enterprise
work.
reporting.
Yep. And in that particular scenario, I know Mike probably used a lot of terms that may or may not be familiar to you, but in that particular scenario, you're basically using Dataverse, which is like a SQL backend, to do your own, you know, to develop and implement your own
Task management.
task management tool of some sort, whatever it is that you need. And then you have full access to the data on the back end to kind of do whatever you want. And the only thing in that case would be, I think, from a licensing perspective, the people who are reporting on it, wherever you're putting it, they may need some licensing, but otherwise it should work. Although I'm thinking about it now, I'm not 100% sure whether or not the data flow is licensed as part of the
Dataverse
teams.
for Teams. It depends on where it exists, right? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, when you build an app, when you're doing Dataverse for Teams environment, one of the choices of things you can build, like Power App, Chatbot, and I think data flows is one of the choices.
You think data flow is one?
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure, yeah.
Okay. I wasn't just sure.
Could we also say, hey, Microsoft, if you're watching this, make
Make it so
Planner better.
you can report on it better. Yeah.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
sure.
Please.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much. That's that's a lot of options. Especially with the that was kind of a surprise, but it makes sense. Maybe if we can get that into a Dataverse and then into a Canvas app, then we can report to these
You
stakeholders.
can do whatever you want. It's all
Simple that.
the world is your oyster, right?
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
All right, that brings us to time. Thanks for everyone for joining us today. Like I said, we do this on the first Wednesday of every month, so you're more than welcome to join again next time. Wanted to plug our newsletter quick. If you want to stay up to date with what's going on at Bulb Digital, scroll down to the bottom of any of our website pages, and you can sign up for our newsletter there. And then lastly, if we were helpful today, we'd love if you could share with a friend and post somewhere that plugs us and shows that we were helpful, and hopefully we can spread this office hours to others so we can help more people in this manner. So again, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next time.
Mm.